The paper on the table said, "Temporary asset transfer." My son called it just a formality. My late husband would have called it a betrayal in disguise. As the morning light touched the unfinished painting beside me, I realized something I've spent my whole life teaching others how to draw lines, but I never learned how to draw one for myself. The harbor has always smelled like salt and oil paint. For most of my life, that scent meant home. The house stands on 3 creaking floors, facing the gray Atlantic. Its windows catch the morning light like open eyes. Once, children filled these rooms laughing, spilling paint, learning to see the world in color. My husband and I used to teach them for free. He believed art could save anyone. Maybe that was why I fell in love with him. After he passed, the laughter left first. Then the colors began to fade. Now it's just me and the gulls. I paint in silence. Some canvases stay unfinished for months, waiting for a reason. That morning, I heard the sound of tires on gravel, Aaron's car. He hadn't been here since the funeral. When he walked in, he hugged me quickly, like someone greeting a client, not a mother. His girlfriend, Maya, followed, heels clicking on the old wooden floor. She was beautiful in a sharp, polished way. Her eyes scanned the walls before they met mine. "Still painting, Mrs. Porter?" she asked with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I said, "I paint to remember." Aaron laughed softly. "You always say that, Mom." They sat down at the table where the contract still lay folded. We talked about his company, how the market had shifted, how investors were pulling out. He said words like bridge loan and temporary transfer. Maya nodded at all the right moments, her hand resting on his arm. I poured coffee and watched the steam rise between us. Every time he said just paperwork, I felt the distance stretch, an invisible thread pulling tighter. He looked around the room, at the brushes, the canvases, the sea beyond the window. "Mom, you could move somewhere smaller," he said. "This house is too big for one person." I smiled. "It's not big when you fill it with memories." He didn't answer. Maya spoke instead. "Sometimes, memories can be relocated. Imagine this place renovated, modernized. You could live closer to town." Her tone was sweet, but I heard the rhythm of sales pitch under every word. The same tone I used to warn my students about: too perfect, too rehearsed. When they left that afternoon, the air felt heavier than before. I walked out to the porch, looked at the sea, and thought about the years I'd spent keeping this place alive, patching roofs, repainting walls, paying taxes with my pension. It wasn't just wood and paint. It was proof that I still existed beyond my son's calendar. Ruth came by from her cafe, carrying 2 cups of tea. She noticed my hands shaking as I took one. "They're planning something," she said quietly. I looked at her, startled. "I saw them outside earlier," she continued. Maya was taking photos of the house. Real estate photos. The sea breeze cut through me like cold glass. Ruth put her hand on mine. "Evelyn, don't let anyone put a price tag on what your love built." That evening, the tide came in high. I sat by the window, the house creaking with every gust. In the fading light, my husband's old easel stood by the wall, holding a half-finished painting of the harbor. The brush was still there, bristles hardened with time. I whispered, "You'd know what to do, don't." But the only answer was the wind, pushing salt through the cracks of the window. That night, I couldn't sleep. The house seemed to breathe beside me, old, stubborn, and still alive. And for the first time in years, I realized, maybe it wasn't just the home that needed saving. Maybe it was me. The morning after the fog, Aaron called. His voice was soft, like he had practiced the lines in a mirror. He asked if he could stop by for a quick chat. I said yes. They arrived together. He came in first, carrying the weight of his briefcase like it was proof. He was a man who solved things. Maya followed with a neat leather folder pressed to her chest. She set it on my kitchen table, right next to my cup of tea. The edges were perfect. Even the paper smelled like a bank. Aaron sat across from me. "Mom," he said, "this is simple, simple." He used to use that word when he wanted a later curfew. "We're close to launch," he continued. The product works. We just need a bridge. 30, maybe 60 days. The bank is willing if we show collateral. Collateral, I repeated. He nodded. The house. Temporarily. On paper only. You'd still live here. Nothing changes. Maya leaned forward, palms open. It's standard practice, Mrs. Porter. A temporary asset transfer. Think of it as a safety rail while Aaron crosses a narrow bridge. She smiled. You remain the legal owner. The title snaps back once the loan is cleared. Snaps back, I said. She slid a pen toward me. The pen traveled half the distance, stopped, and pointed at my hand like a compass needle. Plastic skimmed wood. The sound felt loud in a quiet room. I looked at my son. What happens if the company fails? It won't, he said quickly, and then slower, trying to make softer ground. Even if it did, there are contingencies. We're not talking about failing. We're talking about winning faster. He started listing names. Investors I didn't know. Acronyms that meant nothing to me. He said runway and burn and dilution, like the language itself was proof that he couldn't be wrong. I watched his hands instead of his mouth. He laced his fingers tight, then unclasped them, then laced them again. When he was 7, he did the same thing before admitting he had broken a blue cup. Back then, he looked up and met my eyes. Today, he looked past me, toward the window, toward the harbor. Meyer opened the folder. She turned a stack, then another. She tapped a page. Here's the key section. Temporary transfer. Recorded but reversible. I've highlighted the clause that protects you. A bright strip of ink marked the sentence as if light could be printed. She kept her voice even. No pressure. Only reason. We want to keep you comfortable, Mrs. Porter. This is a formality. It's the fastest way to protect what he's building. What he's building, I said. Aaron leaned in. Mom, you believe in me. You always have. You taught me to take chances. You said fear is a bad teacher. I did, I said. The words were true. The meaning had shifted. Maya glanced at the paintings stacked against the wall. You have such a beautiful space. This way, you don't have to sell anything. You simply help, then life keeps going. Help. Then life keeps going. I picked up the pen, set it down, and folded my hands instead. I will read it. I spoke to them both, but also to myself. He exhaled like he had crossed a small bridge already. Great. I'll come back tomorrow. We can sign then. They stood. Maya placed a business card on top of the folder. The card felt heavier than it looked. At the door, my son hesitated. For a second, the years fell off his face. Thanks, Mom, he said, and his voice was real. Then he was gone. The house sighed back into quiet. Not soft quiet. Waiting quiet. I carried the folder to the living room. Light laid itself across the floorboards in thin lines. The easel faced the window the way my husband liked it, north light, no glare. Dust rose and fell in slow motion, each piece a little boat. I opened the bottom drawer of the old side table and took out his sketchbook. The cover was worn smooth where his thumb had rested 100 times. The binding creaked when I opened it. Inside, charcoal ghosts of our old students, crooked elbows, boats with too many sails, laughter smudged into margins. Halfway through, I found his note, written in his square hand. When love is treated like a tool, it read, draw it again until it looks like love. I traced the sentence with my finger. The paper didn't move. I did. Memory came in small frames. Our first summer in this house, Aaron painting a red tugboat with his father. The paint ran, he cried. My husband rinsed the brush and said, "There's no mistake in art, only a new direction." Aaron laughed. He believed him. A gull called outside. I closed the sketchbook and put it in my lap. The folder waited on the table, tidy, patient, hungry. The kettle clicked. I made more tea because that is what I do when I need time to say nothing. The steam fogged the glass. Through the blur, the harbor lights turned to silver coins. I sat back down, opened the folder, and read. The words were careful. The promises were dressed in grammar. There were stamps and lines, and a place where my name would replace my silence. There was also a paragraph small, buried about default and foreclosure. It used gentle words for hard things. I circled it with my finger. My finger left no ink. My mind did. I called Aaron. He didn't pick up. I set the phone down and tried again. Voicemail. I didn't leave a message. I didn't want my voice recorded next to this request. I called Maya. She answered. Everything okay, there's a default clause, I said. It's standard, she replied. All banks require it. The risk is theoretical. Theoretical risk applied to a real house, I said. Pause, Mrs. Porter, I do this every day. People sign because it helps. Within weeks, it's all cleared. You'll be proud of him. I am proud of him, I said. That's not the question I'm answering. After we hung up, the room felt larger and colder. I stood, walked to the window, and put my palm on the glass. The harbor held steady under a thin wind. I thought of my students, the ones who pressed too hard with their pencils, carving into the paper until the paper tore. They were always surprised when it ripped. They forgot paper has limits. So do people. I sat again, pulled the sketchbook close, and read the line once more. When love is treated like a tool, draw it again until it looks like love. I took a pencil from an old jar and drew a single line across a blank page. The line was faint. I drew it again, steadier. Then I stopped. The most important part of a line is where it ends. Night settled. I put the folder in the kitchen drawer beneath the cloth napkins and the bag of rubber bands. I didn't hide it. I wanted to know where it lived. I washed the cups, turned off the main light, and left the lamp over the easel on. A small island of yellow on a dark sea. I breathed with it. Before bed, I stood by the doorway and spoke into the room the way you talk to a church when it's empty. Thomas, if you were here, what would you tell me? The air held my question like it was storing it for morning. I went upstairs. I slept in fragments. At dawn, I woke to the slow thud of my own heart and a sentence that didn't ask for permission. I will not lend my name to a lie. I came down the stairs, barefoot on cool wood. I opened the drawer and looked at the folder one last time. I set it on the table, placed my palm on it, and then slid it away. I reached for the sketchbook, opened to his note, and whispered the words back to the page. If love has to live on paper to survive, it is not love. It is leverage. That was the moment the anger began to breathe. Quiet, even determined. It didn't shout. It didn't shake. It simply stood up inside me and waited for me to catch up. By the time the harbor bells marked 8, I knew what I would do next. The storm arrived just after sunset. Wind pushed against the windows like it wanted to come inside. The ocean turned black, only the white edges of the waves showing themselves before breaking apart. I stood by the window, watching the water rise and fall. The air smelled of salt and electricity. The house creaked the way old bones do before rain. I thought about the folder in the drawer downstairs, the contract, the pen, the promise I hadn't made. My son's voice still echoed in my head. It's only temporary. Maya's smile, too polished to be real. For years I had taught my students how to mix color, how to find harmony between contrast, but no one had ever taught me how to mix love and self-respect. That night, I realized those two shades never truly blend. Thunder rolled. The lights flickered once, twice, and then steadied. I turned from the window, wrapped my shawl tighter, and went to the kitchen to boil water. The sound of the kettle was small against the wind. When the phone rang, I hesitated. It was Aaron. His name glowing on the screen looked heavier than before. I answered but didn't speak. He didn't notice. He was talking to someone else. Maybe Mayad. She'll sign, he said. Mom always does. She trusts me. Silence. Then, no, she doesn't need to read it. She just signs. The door closed on the other end. Footsteps. Then laughter, hers, not his. The call ended. I stood there, still holding the phone, listening to the storm instead. It sounded cleaner than his voice. I walked to my studio. The window pane rattled, thin lines of rain seeping through. On the table lay an unfinished watercolor, The Harbor at Dawn. The paper had already curled at the edges from humidity. A drop of water fell from the ceiling and landed near the corner. Then another. The colors began to bleed, blue running into ochre, ochre into gray. I didn't stop it. I just watched the colors lose their boundaries, the way people do when they forget who they are trying to protect. I sat down, opened my husband's old sketchbook, and turned to a blank page. The storm outside had rhythm, a pulse that matched my own. I took a pencil and wrote slowly, some storms come to wash away the lie, not the truth. I looked at the sentence for a long time. My hands were steady, but my chest felt tight. For years, silence had been my safest color, soft, neutral, easy to blend. That night, silence turned sharp. I went to the hallway and opened the drawer. The folder was still there. Dry. Untouched. I took it out, placed it on the kitchen table, and stared at the signature line. My name, waiting for me like a trap disguised as loved lightning lit the room. For a second, I saw everything at once. The pen, the paper, the rain streaking down the glass, my reflection in it. A woman who had spent her life giving, explaining, forgiving. And somewhere in that flash, something broke loose. I whispered, "Not this time." The sound surprised me. It didn't tremble. It didn't plead. It stood. I picked up the sketchbook again. The unfinished watercolor was ruined now, a blur of sea and sky, no horizon left. Still, it was beautiful. Because for the first time, it wasn't pretending to be perfect. I tore the ruined page out, pressed it flat on the table, and wrote across it in ink, "Love is not obedience. It's truth spoken even when it shakes." The storm kept raging. I let it. Every crash of thunder felt like a drumbeat inside me. I made tea and sat by the window until the rain began to slow. At midnight, the harbor lights blinked through the mist. The sea was calmer now, but I wasn't tired. I thought about tomorrow, about what I needed to do. Maybe I couldn't teach Aaron how to love me differently, but I could show him how I loved myself. I closed the sketchbook, blew out the candle, and said quietly into the dark, "This house has heard enough silence. It's time it heard my voice." That was the night the storm passed, not outside, but inside me. The next morning, the storm was gone. The sea outside was calm again, as if nothing had happened. But something inside me had changed. The silence in the house no longer felt safe. It felt like permission. I woke early. The air still smelled of rain and salt. I made tea, packed a folder, and left the house before the sun rose fully over the harbor. The walk to town was slow. The wooden planks of the dock were slick under my shoes. Boats rocked gently, their ropes creaking against the poles. Every sound felt like a reminder, even tied things can move. The Harbor Art Foundation sat in an old brick building near the pier. My husband and I used to bring our students there every summer to display their paintings. The place had always felt like a small miracle, a space where color replaced loneliness. When I stepped inside, the scent of varnish and coffee welcomed me. The receptionist, a young woman with paint stains on her sleeve, looked up and smiled. "Mrs. Porter," she said, "it's been a while." "Yes," I answered. "Too long." She led me to the director's office. The man there, Mr. Hayes, was kind-eyed and quiet. He stood to greet me. "Evelyn, I heard about Thomas passing. I'm sorry I never reached out sooner." I nodded. He would have told me not to dwell on it. He smiled faintly. He always did have a way of turning loss into art. I placed the folder on his desk. The same folder that once held my son's contract. But now, it carried something else, a new document. "My decision. I'd like to make a donation," I said. "The house by the harbor." He blinked, surprised. "You mean your homies," I said. "It's time it belonged to more than just me." He hesitated. "Are you sure, Evelyn?" "That house is my memory," I interrupted. "But memories can live elsewhere. I want it to be part of something brighter." He opened the folder and read. My voice stayed calm, but my heart beat like the tide against the shore. "When my husband and I built that house," I said, "we thought it would grow with our family. But now, it will grow with art. I want children, elders, anyone who's lost something, to come there and find color again." He looked up. "You understand this means you'll no longer own it." I smiled. "If I must choose who keeps it, I'd rather give it to light than to greed." He nodded slowly. "We can make that happen." He brought out the official form, the transfer of property to the Harbor Art Foundation. The paper was thick, smooth, unmarked. He handed me the pen. I took it. The same motion my son had asked for. But this time, it was my will, not his. My hand didn't tremble. I signed my name, letter by letter, like a painter finishing the final stroke of a long piece. When the pen left the page, it felt like the closing of a door, and the opening of another. Mr. Hayes pressed his hand gently over the signature. You've just given this town something extraordinary. I exhaled. Maybe I've just given myself a way to start over. As I walked out, the morning sun broke through the clouds. Light spilled across the harbor, turning the water gold. The gulls circled overhead, their cries sharp and free. I paused by the edge of the dock. The sea looked endless. For the first time in years, that didn't frighten me. It felt like possibility. I whispered to the wind, Thomas, it's done. The house will live. And in that whisper, I heard something shift, as if the walls of my old home could finally breathe again. I turned toward the path leading back to the hill. From that day on, the house by the harbor was no longer a place waiting to be taken. It was a gift given. To art, to community, to the kind of love that doesn't demand ownership. That morning, I didn't lose a house. I gained a beginning. Aaron arrived 2 days later. His car stopped sharply on the gravel, tires crunching against the driveway he hadn't walked up in months. Beside him was a man in a dark suit, holding a briefcase. Behind them, Maya stepped out in heels too high for the uneven ground. She didn't look at the house. She looked at the roof, the porch, the walls, as if she was already estimating the value. Aaron knocked once, then pushed the door open without waiting. Mom. He called out. His tone was brisk, practiced, the same one he used when he wanted to sound in control. The house smelled of paint and lemon soap. Inside, the morning light fell through wide windows, warmer than he remembered. He paused. Something felt different. On the front wall, a new plaque gleamed in gold letters: Evelyn Porter Art House, free studio for seniors. For a moment, he didn't understand. Then his breath caught. What is this? He asked, almost to himself. Maya frowned, scanning the room. You've got to be kidding me. She turned to Aaron, her voice rising. You said she hadn't signed anything yet. Aaron looked around, speechless. The furniture had been moved. The big wooden table, once their family's dinner table, was covered in sketchbooks and paintbrushes. Easels stood by the windows. 3 older women in aprons were laughing softly as they painted, unaware of the storm at the door. Ruth appeared from the hallway, a mug in her hand, smiling when she saw them. Oh, she said, calm as ever, you must be Aaron. He tried to steady his voice. Where's my mother? She's out back, Ruth replied. Helping set up for the afternoon class. We've got 12 new members this week. She took a slow sip of her coffee. You should be proud. The whole town's talking about her. Maya stepped forward. This is insane. She can't just. Ruth cut her off gently. She didn't sell her house, dear. She gave it a new purpose. There's a difference. Aaron turned toward the back door, pushing past her. Outside, in the garden overlooking the harbor, Evelyn stood among rows of easels, showing an elderly man how to mix blue and gray for the sea. She looked peaceful, her gray hair tied up in a bun, her hands stained with color. When she saw her son, she smiled, not nervously, not apologetically. Just a quiet smile. Aaron, she said, you're here. He walked toward her, the lawyer trailing behind. Mom, what have you done? What I should have done long ago, she answered. I chose where this house belongs. You gave it away. His voice cracked. To strangers glanced at the students. People bent over their canvases, focused and alive. They're not strangers, she said. They're people who still believe art can heal what time takes. Maya stepped in again. Impatient Mrs. Porter, you don't understand what this means financially. You can't just transfer a property like this. Evelyn turned to her calmly. It's already done. Maya froze. Then she laughed, a short, bitter sound. Then I'm done too. She grabbed her bag and walked back toward the car without another word. Aaron stood still. The lawyer cleared his throat quietly. Mr. Porter, there's nothing we can do now. It's legally binding. Aaron didn't answer. The man left, leaving him alone in the garden with his mother. For a while, neither of them spoke. Only the sound of brushes against canvas filled the air. Finally, Evelyn said softly, "When your father and I built this house, we wanted it filled with light. Somewhere along the way, we let shadows in." Aaron looked around, at the open windows, the laughter, the color. "You turned it into a school?" he whispered. She nodded. "A home for anyone who still dreams, even after losing everything." He swallowed hard. "And me, what am I supposed to be?" Evelyn's gaze softened. "My son. Still my son, but not my owner." He looked down. His voice broke. "I thought I was saving you." "I know," she said. "But sometimes saving someone means letting them stand." He stared at the plaque again. The words seemed to grow heavier. "Free studio for seniors." He hadn't noticed the small line beneath it, dedicated to Thomas and Aaron Porter. His throat tightened. You put my name there." "Yes," she said quietly, "because I still believe you'll learn what that means someday." Ruth walked over, wiping her hands on her apron. She stood beside Aaron and looked at the view. "You see, son," she said gently, "she didn't sell it. She made it untouchable. You can't buy what's been given away freely." Aaron didn't respond. His chest rose and fell as if he was trying to breathe through the truth. He looked back at his mother, who was helping another student fix a crooked easel. Her laughter mingled with the sound of gulls outside. In that moment, he understood. He hadn't lost his mother. He'd only lost the right to underestimate her. The house around him seemed to hum with life. The voices, the colors, the warmth. It wasn't a house anymore. It was her final lesson. And for the first time in years, Aaron stayed silent, not from pride, but from respect. Months passed quietly after the foundation opened. The harbor smelled of salt and new beginnings. Every morning, I unlocked the doors of the studio, set out the paint jars, and watched the sunlight move slowly across the wooden floors. The house no longer echoed, it breathed. The walls carried laughter, now soft, careful laughter, the kind that grows from people who have learned how to survive. Most of my students were seniors. Widows, veterans, people who had stopped believing they still had something left to create. We didn't talk about loss. We just painted. And somewhere between the brushstrokes, healing happened without permission. One afternoon, as I was washing brushes by the sink, I heard footsteps behind me. When I turned, Aaron was standing in the doorway. He looked different, the arrogance was gone. His face seemed older, but also lighter. He was holding something in an envelope, folded and soft around the edges. "Mom," he said quietly. "Can I come in?" He nodded. "You already are." He glanced around the room, the canvases, the students' work, the smell of turpentine, and tea. It all seemed to weigh on him. He took a deep breath. "I didn't come here for the house," I smiled. "I know." He hesitated. Then his voice broke. "I came because I don't need the house anymore. I was afraid of losing you." For a moment, I didn't speak. I had waited years to hear words that simple. He took a step closer. "I thought you signing the papers meant you still needed me. But maybe it was me who needed to feel important." I wiped my hands on a towel and reached for a small wooden box on the shelf. Inside was a paintbrush, old, the handle worn smooth by time and touch. It was his father's. I placed it in Aaron's hand. "Then paint," I said. "When you learn to listen to color, you'll hear what your heart's been trying to say." He stared at the brush as if it might shatter. "I don't even know where to start. Start with what you remember," I said, "and let the rest forgive itself." He looked up, eyes wet but steady. "You really forgave?" May nodded. "Forgiveness isn't a gift for the other person, Aaron. It's how we set ourselves free." He nodded slowly, turning the brush between his fingers. Outside, the afternoon light had turned golden. The waves touched the shore with the same rhythm as years before, but somehow it all looked softer. For a while, we just stood there, letting the silence do the work words couldn't. Later, I sat by the window and watched him try his first strokes on canvas. They were shaky, uneven, unsure. But they were his. As the paint began to dry, I thought about how easily love turns invisible when it's wrapped in fear. We think we're protecting each other, but what we're really doing is building distance. So many parents stay quiet to keep the peace, and so many children mistake silence for indifference. It's not cruelty that makes them distant, it's the noise of survival. They grow up learning to solve, to fix, to chase, and somewhere along the way, they forget how to feel. That's how good people become careless with love. Not because they don't care, but because they've forgotten how to show it. I used to think Aaron stopped loving me. Now I know, he just forgot how to speak the language we once shared. And that's the hardest truth of all: children don't become heartless. They just grow tired of their own fear. As I watched him paint, his shoulders slowly relaxed. His strokes grew longer, calmer, more certain. He looked up at me and smiled, a real one. The kind I hadn't seen since he was 10 years old. That was the moment I realized something simple: we were both learning again. He was learning to love without control, and I was learning to love without condition. The sun dipped lower, washing the studio in amber light. I closed my eyes and let the warmth rest on my face. Forgiveness isn't a color you find in a tube. It's what happens when two broken shades finally learn to blend. And that evening, surrounded by the sound of brushes, salt air, and my son's quiet breathing beside me, I knew the house had done its final work. It had brought us both home. Dear mothers, who fear the quiet, if tonight your phone didn't ring, and the only sound in your house is the clock ticking through another evening, please don't take it as proof that you've been forgotten. Sometimes silence doesn't mean absence. It just means the world outside is too loud for your children to hear themselves think. I know what loneliness feels like. It's not just the empty chair at the table, or the way the kettle sounds louder when no one answers back. It's the question that grows heavier with every birthday, every holiday. Did I matter enough to be remembered? But let me tell you something I learned too late. You are not defined by who comes back. You are defined by who you remain when no one's watching. So make the tea anyway. Pour it into your favorite cup. Open the curtains, even if the day feels too bright. Light still belongs to you. If your hands tremble, paint. If your back aches, sit by the window and breathe. If your heart feels tired, whisper your own name the way you once whispered your children's when they were small. Because that name still deserves tenderness. Some days, you will feel invisible. You'll wonder if all the care you gave has simply dissolved into air. But love doesn't vanish, it transforms. It lives in the habits they forget came from you, the way they fold a shirt, the way they hold a cup, the way they calm their own children. You live there, in gestures too ordinary to notice. There's a kind of courage in staying gentle when life tries to make you hard. There's beauty in waking up, even when no one is waiting. And there's power in realizing that peace isn't something given to you. It's something you build quietly, moment by moment. So if the house feels too big tonight, fill it with small sounds. The stirring of a spoon, the pages of a book turning, the hum of your favorite song. Let the air carry those sounds to the walls, so they remember you were here, strong, tender, and still becoming. And when the memories come back, the laughter, the arguments, the meals shared, don't push them away. Let them sit with you. They are proof that you lived fully, that your heart knew how to love without keeping score. You don't need a grand ending. You just need one quiet morning when you look at yourself in the mirror and think, I am still here. And I am enough. Maybe your children will call tomorrow. Maybe they won't. Either way, you can still open the window, watch the light move across your floor, and smile for yourself. Because the truth is, you were never waiting for someone to fill your life. You were always the life itself. With love, Evelyn, people often believe that love means giving without limits. They think that the more they sacrifice, the deeper their love becomes. But love without boundaries isn't love. It's surrender. In my art class, I see this lesson every day. When a student paints for too long on one corner of the canvas, the color starts to lose its shape. Too much blue turns the sky muddy. Too much water drowns the light. So I tell them, sometimes, the most beautiful curve is the one that stops at the right place. Boundaries work the same way. They are not walls. They are frames, the structure that allows the picture to exist. Without a frame, even the most beautiful painting will fall apart. For years, I thought that being a mother meant never saying no. I thought silence was a kind of love. When my son needed money, I gave it. When he wanted my time, I dropped everything. And when he took my trust for granted, I stayed quiet because I was afraid of losing him. But silence doesn't build closeness. It builds resentment. I learned that the hard way. In psychology, they say that boundaries are not barriers. They are the invisible language of respect, the quiet way we teach others how to love us properly. Every no we say gently is really a yes to peace. Every pause we take is a way of saying, my worth matters too. One morning, during class, an older man named Henry was painting a ship. He kept erasing the horizon over and over again. When I asked why, he said, I don't want to make mistakes. I smiled. Then maybe the mistake is not letting the paint dry. He looked at me for a moment and laughed softly. That day, he finished his first complete painting. Not because it was perfect, but because he stopped trying to fix what wasn't broken. We do this in love all the time. Don't keep overcorrecting, overgiving, over-explaining, until the relationship loses its color. We call it kindness. But sometimes it's just fear wearing a polite face. True love has edges. It knows where to end and where to begin again. It doesn't demand exhaustion. It allows rest. It doesn't ask for proof. It asks for presence. I used to believe that setting a boundary would make me selfish. But I've come to understand, boundaries are not selfish. They are honest. They are how love learns to breathe. When I told Aaron I was giving the house to the foundation, it wasn't punishment, it was clarity. I finally drew a line between love and possession. And somehow, that line brought us closer than ever before. Now, when I teach my students, I remind them every brushstroke needs air around it. Every person needs space to stand. Because when love has no air, it suffocates. And when it has too much, it drifts away. Balance. That's the quiet art of loving. You can't find it in words or promises. You find it in pauses. In the courage to say, this is enough. So if you're listening now, and you've been told that good mothers never say no, remember this: you can love someone deeply and still protect yourself. You can give without losing your center. You can stay kind without staying silent. Boundaries don't end love. They keep it alive long enough to grow. That's the truth no one taught me when I was young. And maybe that's why I paint, because every line I draw now is a reminder that love, like art, only becomes beautiful when it learns where to stop. A year passed. The harbor changed with the seasons, but the house stayed the same, bright, alive, full of voices and paint. The Evelyn Porter art house stood at the edge of the water, its windows open to the salt breeze, the walls covered with stories that once had no place to belong. That evening, people filled the gallery for the first annual exhibition: students, neighbors, old friends, even strangers who'd heard about the woman who gave her home to art. They wandered through the rooms, tracing the brushstrokes of those who had rediscovered their purpose. In the center of the hall hung one painting, The Harbor Before Dawn. Soft light spilled across the canvas, not bright, not dark, but somewhere in between. It was the color of forgiveness. Aaron stood beside me, quiet for a long time. He looked older, but steadier. He whispered, "Dad taught you to paint. You taught me how to love." I didn't answer right away. Sometimes silence says more than words. I looked at the painting and thought of all the mornings I had watched the sky over this harbor, wondering when I would stop living in the past. That morning had finally come. He turned to me again. "I used to think love meant taking care of someone until they had nothing left to give," he said. I was wrong. I smiled. So was I. I thought motherhood meant never saying no. He nodded slowly. Maybe love is what happens after both people learn they're wrong. We stood there for a while. Two people who had failed each other, now learning how to stand side by side again. Not as parent and child, not as debtor and savior, but as equals in the quiet art of starting over. Later, when the guests left and the room was still, I sat near the painting and listened to the ocean outside. The waves sounded like breathing. For the first time in years, my heart matched their rhythm. I realized something simple. We spend our first half of life trying to shape our children, and the second half watching them shape us in return. That's the unspoken truth of family. The roles never stay the same. We all take turns teaching and learning and forgiving. Being a parent doesn't end when your children grow up. It evolves. It becomes quieter, wiser. Sometimes, the most powerful lesson you can give is not protection, but example. When children see their parents reclaim joy, they learn that aging isn't loss. It's proof that love can survive change. When they see you stand firm in self-respect, they learn what dignity looks like. And when they see you forgive, they learn what strength really means. We don't get to choose how our children grow. But we do get to choose how we stand before them. Broken or whole, bitter or free. And the truth is, they learn more from how we rise than from anything we say. That's what the painting means to me. Not beauty. Not talent. But a record of rising, one brushstroke at a time. Aaron came back into the room to turn off the lights. He stopped beside me, his hand resting gently on my shoulder. Mom, he said softly, this house, it's not just yours anymore. It's everyone's. I looked up at the ceiling, where the reflection of the sea danced across the beams. That's what I wanted, I said. A place that forgives. He smiled, and for a moment, I saw his father in him. Calm, steady, full of quiet faith. As we walked out together, the painting behind us glowed faintly under the last light. It didn't need an audience. It had already done what it was meant to do. Sometimes, to keep a family, you have to lose it first. Because only when our children see us living truthfully, without fear, without guilt, do they finally learn what love with boundaries looks like. And that, I think, is what forgiveness truly is. The moment you stop asking to be understood and start choosing to be free.